Finally, let's create our workspace container. Okay, so this is the place where all the magic will happen. The idea behind the workspace is that all essential tools for development we will have in our container, so we don't have to install them on our operating system. So every time we will do development, we're just gonna SSH into our container. We will have a nice small Linux environment where we can do all sorts of things, starting from Composer, including Git, and maybe connecting to MySQL with MySQL client, and so on and so on. So I'm gonna start with DockerCompose. I'm gonna define another service, and we're gonna call it Workspace. And we are going to build from context, build context, and it's going to be Docker Workspace. Next we're gonna call our image, we're gonna call it Workspace Ubuntu, following our naming convention. Then we have container name, and I'm just gonna copy that and paste Workspace, and let's leave it for now. So now let's create a directory for our new service. I'm gonna call Workspace. Great, and inside we need our Docker file. Okay, so this container we're gonna build on Ubuntu. The reason why is because I am very familiar with Debian, and I really like Ubuntu. And here is a very minimal Ubuntu image, which, as the name says, for Docker friendliness. So this is exactly what we want, and some basic information. Only consumes 8.3 megabytes of RAM. It's very small, and according to developers is more powerful than BusyBox and Alpine. I mean, sounds good to me. So let's use that. And so I can go back to my code editor, and we gonna build from this image. And now this is going to be a lot of happening. So first of all, I'm gonna copy and paste some pseudocode and quickly explain what we're gonna do. So first of all, we're gonna have to set some variables. Then we will change our default shell. This is a little hack, I'll show you how it works. Then we're gonna have to add a PHP repository so we can install latest version of PHP. We're gonna install dependencies, packages, and so on. After that, we will install Composer. Then we will have to create our workspace user. The reason why is because if we don't do that and we try to run Composer as a root, then we will get this nasty box or the warning saying that we're not supposed to run Composer as a root user. Then we will install Node, and I will use MVM for that. Then I would like to have Redis CLI installed. We will have installed also MySQL client, so we can make connection to our database. This is included in install packages in this step. Then we will have some bash aliases, so that will make easier for us connecting to MySQL and Redis CLI. Then we'll create working directory. Then we're gonna set working directory. So what this does, every time we're gonna SSH into our container, we want to land in a specific directory, and on the end we're gonna expose our pods, because we're gonna run some node application, maybe some sort of task runners, or it might be a mix from Laravel, and or maybe something like Webpack, whatever it is. Some of these applications need to be exposed on port 3000, so we can cache them in the browser. So let's start with our variables. So I'm gonna quickly jump into DockerCompose, and in here what we want to do, we want to specify some arguments. So we're gonna do that. I'm just gonna copy and paste all the arguments we need, and this is what we want. So MySQL user, MySQL password and database, we already got this in our env. Now Workspace node version, this is a new variable which I need to actually create in my.env, so I'm gonna copy that, copy, and go to my.env, and on the very end gonna create that, and this is the version of node we want to install. Because with NVM you can specify the version which you want to use. NVM is basically node version manager. So if I go back quickly to the browser and quickly go and search for Node.js, let's see what's the latest version, 10.4.1, and I'm gonna use that. I mean, I don't really care about long-term support, as I'm not building any production apps here. This is just for development purposes. So it was 10.4.1 if I'm correct. Yes, so that's what we're gonna use, and let's save that. So now let me grab this and go back to our DockerCompose, and let's just pass this in here. Great, so now let's go back to our Workspace Docker file, and we're going to be setting some variables. So you already know how to do that. You need to grab the arguments, then pass these arguments and set them as variables. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. You already know how to do that. Next we're going to specify a default shell. So some of the commands we're going to be running in this Docker file, I want to make sure that they always run with bash. And what we can do, we can run some commands, and I'm gonna remove directory bin bash, bin sh, and then I'm gonna create symbolic link lns bin bash to bin sh. So what this does, this basically make sure that we always run bash. So even if our Docker file try to run commands with sh, because that was removed and was relinked to our bash, we actually end up executing bash. So this is a little hack, is very helpful. Next we need to add PHP repositories, so we're gonna do run and add one second, apt repository, and we're gonna specify y flag and ppa Andre php. So we've got our repository. Next we need to install all the packages we need, but we start with updating. So apt get, and we do update, and apt get install. We will specify y flag. Y flag means if there is any prompt during the installation, just confirm. So now all the packages we need, I'm just gonna copy and paste that again. So first of all, we start with all the dependencies we need. So we've got things like build essentials, and that will make sure that we've got all the tools needed for compiling. We've got Python, we will need that for our node, and some other dependencies. Next, we need to install PHP, and we need just a minimal installation so we can run Composer. So I'm just gonna copy and paste that in here. So this is all we need in order to actually install Composer, and on the very end we're just gonna install some tools we want to use in our container, and this is going to be as follow. So we want Git, we want curl, we want wget, vim, unzip MySQL client. So this step is complete, and now we're gonna install Composer. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna download Composer installation script, but I want to do that in temp directory. So I'm gonna do tmp and run the commands which are responsible for installing Composer. So first we're gonna grab Composer installable, and next we've got another one which is run tmp, and we're gonna install Composer. So what we do, we're gonna do that. Great, as I mentioned before, we need to create a workspace user. So we're not gonna be so we're not gonna be SSHing as root, but as a specific workspace user. So we can create user without a password, and we can do that with this command. This is just standard Linux command to create a new user, but worth mentioning is that we've got disable password, and also I specify the home directory to home workspace for the user workspace, and then on the end we gonna set the group for this user. So we want the group to be workspace, and now you might notice that we've got some code repetitions. So what we can do in here, we can specify the variable which is going to be nvm workspace user, and we can just assign the value to it, workspace, and then we don't have to actually type our user every time, we can just reuse it. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna replace it in here, and I'm gonna do exactly the same here and here and here. So our user is already created. Now we need to install Node, and we're gonna do that with nvm, but to avoid any permission issues, we're gonna actually install Node as workspace user. So what we can do, we can say, okay, all these commands after this line run as a workspace user, so as a user workspace, and now we can install nvm for this user. So what we're gonna do, so this is the command to install nvm. So we're just grabbing the file and install it with bash. Now there are some variables we can pass to installer, and we can pass nvm dir directory where we want to install nvm. So I'm just gonna do that. So I'm just saying nvm directory, I want to install this in home, in my user home directory /nvm. This is where it's going to be installed, but this directory doesn't exist, so we have to create it first. So let me grab this, paste that in here. So we create the directory, then we set the variable, and the installer will install nvm into this directory. Okay, next we need to actually install Node. So what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna copy this and paste. So here we are sourcing the file nvm.sh. Then we installing the version specified in our .env file, so that's going to be version 10.4.1. Then we set this version as our default, and nvm use that makes sure that we always use this version of Node. As a final step, we need to add Node to the path, and npm node modules to the node path. So I'm just gonna copy this and paste as well. So we need that as well. So that will make sure that we actually can use Node in our container. And as a final step, we need to also configure our npm. So as you've seen before, we installed Python 2.7, and npm in some cases needs Python, for example, to compile some packages, and we're gonna do that with this command, npm config set Python. That will set Python path for npm to this path, and we installed Python here, and it's going to be installed into this directory so we can use it with our npm. Okay, great. Next we need to install Redis CLI. I mean, there is no really a way to just install Redis CLI, so what we're gonna have to do, let me just copy and paste. So we're gonna have to do this. So what we do in here, we actually need to download source for Redis, but we do all of that in temporary directory, and then we just grab tarball file for Redis. Next we extract the file, then we actually make, and then we don't install. All we just want to grab Redis CLI, and we're gonna copy this into user local /bin. That will add Redis CLI to the path, and on the end we just want to remove this Redis stable directory from temporary folder. Okay, I'm gonna leave aliases for now. We need to create a working directory, so we're gonna do run, and we're gonna create directory mkdir, and we're just gonna do code. This is where our code will live, our code base, and then we need to set working directories, so we're just gonna do workdir, and we will set this to the directory we just created, and on the end we need to expose our port 3000, so we're just gonna do expose and port 3000. Bash aliases I left on the purpose. I just want to show you why they are very important and how much actually they make life easier. So with all this out of the way, we should be able to actually pull this image and build our container. So let me save that. Let me just inspect DockerCompose. I think we're missing a few things, and yes we do. We're missing links because we're going to be connecting to Redis container. We need to actually link Redis, and we're going to be using MySQL client to connect to a database container as well, so we need to link MySQL. And also we need ports, as we expose in port 3000, so we're gonna do 3000 and 3000, and I think that's it. No, we also need volumes. We need to mount our code base into our container, and as you remember, our working directory is code, so that's where our code base will be mounted. So when we SSH into our containers, we are straight in the place where our code base is, and we can start working with it. So if I go back to my DockerCompose, I'm just gonna do code, and let me quickly inspect workspace build. I think I covered everything, and we should be able to actually build this container. So I'm gonna save that and quickly jump into terminal. Okay, there is a lot of things going on, so this will take a while for the first time, so just be patient. Let's do docker compose up-d, and let's just leave it to finish. So Docker will pull the image, and then we'll go through the build from the Docker file. And because we are doing quite a lot in there, that might take a bit. I think mine is running from cache, so it might be a little bit faster than yours, but yeah, let's just leave it to the end. Okay, we got the small error. Let's quickly fix that. So let's go back to our Docker file, and what's going on here is fine. It's going to be yeah, I forget about cd and cd. So let's save that and just rerun this. And we got another error. Already CLI permission denied. Let's have a look. So it's failing on Redis. And why is it doing that? I have no idea. Oh yes, that's because I didn't switch the user. So here, as you can see, we're running these commands as Workspace user, but then we finish with our node and we want to switch to root user. So I'm just gonna do user root, and let's quickly try to rerun this, and that should solve the issue. And looks like our container was built. Let's just list our containers, make sure our workspace is running, and it's running. So now we can SSH into it, and we're gonna do that with Docker Compose this time. Docker Compose also allows you to SSH into containers. So we do exec, and now we can specify user, and the user we want is Workspace. And in case of Docker Compose, we just need to specify the name of the service, so we can do Workspace and our shell, so we're gonna use bash, and that should let us into container, and we are in. If we list our files, you can see our code base is available for us. So now let's test some things. So as you can see, we've got Git, we've got Composer installed, and we don't get any warnings, which is good. Next, let's check version of Node, and Node is running, is installed, and same for the npm-v, and looks like it's installed. So now I mentioned that I want to be able to use MySQL client and Redis CLI from my workspace. So normally, what would you do to connect to MySQL console? You would do something like MySQL and dash host. So in our case, it's going to be MySQL, and then we need to specify user, which is going to be admin, and we need to specify password, which is going to be admin, and we need to specify, well, we can specify database, which is going to be my project, but we don't have to. So if I do that, as you can see, I'm connected. So if I do show databases, okay, I've got error. Databases, you can see we can list databases and we can do all operations from the console, but annoying thing is that we have to use this syntax every time, and this is very annoying. I don't want to do that. All I want to do is, let me just exit that, let me just exit the console. All I want to do just my SQL and connect, and being able to connect into my MySQL console straight away. We can do the same for Redis. So if I run Redis CLI, that will obviously say us that the connection is refused because Redis is not running locally. But with Redis CLI, what we can do, we can specify host, and because we link our service, we can just say Redis, and that should allow us to connect, but we get connection refused, and this is because our configuration for Redis is not correct. So let me quickly switch to code editor, and I'm gonna fix that. So if I go to Redis configuration file, you will find that we've got the bind address, so that will just allow connections from the local host. So for now, just to quickly solve that, we can just comment this out. And also there is a protected mode, so we're gonna set this to no for now. As I mentioned, this is just a very easy dirty quick fix, but this is just a development environment, so we don't have to worry too much about it. So let's quickly exit our workspace, and let's recreate our Redis container. So we're gonna do build and force recreate. So that should recreate our Redis container. And now, if I'm correct, we should be able to connect with Redis CLI from our workspace. So let me quickly SSH into it, and if I do Redis CLI -h Redis, I should be able to connect to the console, and I am in the console. So if I do ping, I should get pong, and so on and so on. But again, this is not the best way to do it, because I can specify alias like Redis connect, and all I need to remember is just to do Redis connect, and I'm gonna be always able to use my Redis console. So let's quickly sort that out. So I go back to Workspace Docker file, and in our aliases, what we need to do, let me just copy and paste that. So first of all, we're gonna set a variable which we're gonna call bash aliases, and all it does, it just have a value of our path to our file, and our bash aliases is going to be in our user home directory. So home, this will expand to workspace, bash aliases, and we don't have this file, so let's quickly touch it. So we're gonna create the file, and then we're gonna create some aliases. So first one is for our MySQL, and what we do here, we just echoing some output and appending to the end of the file. And as you can see, I've got here past the variables. That's the variables we actually grabbed for our .env, and the reason why I'm doing this is because if I change that in my .env and I'm gonna rerun my workspace, I'm not gonna be able to connect with my alias, so this has to be dynamic. So I'm passing database, user, password, and I'm gonna do exactly the same for Redis. I mean, it's not that important because command is not that complicated, but still it's gonna be nice to have it. So here all I do, I just specify alias for Redis connect, Redis CLI with the host. So let's save that and go back to terminal and exit and try to recreate our workspace container. So workspace, and if I'm correct, that shouldn't take too long now because most of the build is cached. And I was right. So now if I SSH into workspace container and I do MySQL connect, I should be able to connect with no problems, and I can do show databases, great, and I can do use my project and maybe show tables, but we don't have any. I mean, you get the idea. Okay, let's check if Redis is working. Redis connect, and looks like it is. Ping and so on, blah blah blah, whatever you want to do in here. This is working fine. Okay, so I think we covered everything in terms of setting up the container.